My name is Andrew Sweatman. I run arthousegarage.com. I'm a film critic. I do a podcast as well and review movies on the internet. Actually, I moved around a lot as a kid. Mostly grew up in Texas and Alabama, but then moved to Arkansas in junior high. So I've been in Arkansas since 7th grade, and I never thought I'd work with anything movie related growing up. It wasn't until really 2015, 2016 that I really thought, maybe I could actually do something creative in the movie world, and decided to start the podcast then. I definitely liked movies a lot growing up, loved Star Wars and that kind of thing as a kid, but it wasn't until really college that I watched, I guess, more serious movies and realized I think I really connect with this. And growing up, I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of movies that I wanted to see, but there was a lot of things. Like the first week of college, I went and rented Pulp Fiction and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and just did some of these big movies that I'd heard about, and was just amazed at how much craft can go into filmmaking, and later realized how much of an impact it can have on myself and other people as well. I went to Ouachita Baptist. I had an English degree, and I was able to work film things into my college degree. To some degree, they didn't have a film program there. They have some film things now, I think. But whenever I could, I would write about, okay, here's a novel, I'm going to compare it to this film, or different things like that. And was able to actually have one or two film classes during that time as well. And that was definitely had an impact as well, just opening my eyes more to the history of film. And so on the podcast now, I try to follow classic films, kind of modern art house films, and keep it in those kind of realms. Art house, if you don't know that word, it's the word that back in the day there was kind of the big cineplexes where you go see the big movies, and then the art house where you go see the smaller kind of probably lower budget things. And that's what art house being sort of a genre now almost. Those are the kinds of movies I like the best. But then the garage idea was, originally I was going to make it in my actual garage. It ended up not happening, but that was my first idea because I needed a space. Where am I going to do this? But it also, I liked the idea that it was art house is can be kind of highfalutin or hoity-toity or something, but the garage is a very down-to-earth place in your home. And so I was trying to kind of marry that idea too, that we can again make this open and accessible for everybody. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was at kind of a turning point in my life. It's 2015, 2016. We had our first child, my wife and I. Her name's Rosie. She had a lot of health issues, and she was had to be in the hospital here at Arkansas Children's for a very long time, several months. And it was a really scary time. And before that, I had a certain idea of kind of what the trajectory of my life would be, but that sort of leveled the playing field a little bit, and I didn't know. It was also a time of political upheaval in our country in 2016, and so I just came through that time with a lot of questioning and a lot of changing personally, and I got out of the other side of that and thought, okay, what am I going to do now? And that's when I started really getting into movie podcasts. I liked movies before, but I started just listening to film podcasts all the time, and thought, I think I could do this. And then actually it was going to some film events here in Little Rock. The Arkansas Cinema Society did their first year of their Filmland. Now it's called, it had a different name then. But going to that the first year, I thought, there's stuff happening right here in Arkansas, and there's enough people that I could have on as guests, and there's enough people excited about that kind of thing that I really should do something. And along with the political upheaval idea, it felt like things were getting more and more divided, as they have continued to be. And I could look at my own life and say, okay, when I watched this film, for instance, when I watched The Apartment for the first time, one of my favorite films, I feel like that movie really informed me or helped me empathize, made me a better feminist. And so things like that, I feel like movies really have changed my life. If I can somehow invite people and encourage people to watch more challenging movies. Again, I love blockbusters, but I think it's a movie like The Apartment or those kind of more smaller dramas that can help people empathize across the aisle or wherever with other types of people. So I really do see it as maybe I can improve the world a little bit with this podcast that I do. I call it the Snob-Free Podcast because I have been in situations before many times where I felt like I don't know that much about movies, having not seen a ton of movies growing up, and just feeling intimidated by, people who do know a lot about movies, and wanting it to be in a very inviting space. And I've also listened to a podcast where I feel like I don't really understand what they're talking about. So I want to make it very accessible to anyone who wants to get into more challenging films or wants to just push their boundaries a little bit with cinema, because I definitely have watched movies before and felt like, oh, this is a significant film, but I know I didn't fully understand it. So I'm doing some learning about it, research about it, trying to bring that into the podcast as well to hopefully help people learn more. Yeah, so I just feel like, setting aside quality judgments to try to engage with the work, whether I think it's the best movie I've seen all year or one of the worst, that's less interesting to me than, okay, what's here? How can we engage with this? What was this artist trying to say? And that's where I think having a second person on and kind of digging into a work and discussing its merits and its flaws, but also just the thematic things that are there. And that's probably my English major background is, reading novels and figuring out the thematic things and what can we disagree with or agree with other critics that have said ththings about this. So I just enjoy being part of the conversation in that way, and I'm hopeful that it's good for listeners as well. And, I always have loved interviewing, and like I appreciate a good interviewer on growing up and stuff. Like I was fascinated by that role, the person asking the questions. So I try to hopefully work on that for myself too. I enjoy trying to ask good questions that show that I have engaged with the work and appreciate the work that they've done, and but also want to learn more. And I think that's part of the snob-free thing too, is as far as like the word film critic is kind of an uneasy hat for me because I'm not that critical. I'm not that opinionated for a film critic. I'm really more interested in the analysis side of film criticism. If you look at the history of film criticism, there are a lot of critics who say, okay, this movie's good, this movie's bad. But there are also a lot of critics who look at it and say, what's here, what can we engage with? For setting aside quality judgments, what is this artist trying to say and how can we connect with that? And that, I think, is more where I sit with it. So, so recently I had Walt Peterson and Blair H. on the podcast. We just connected through another filmmaker that actually Molly Wheat is their producer. But I like to do that kind of thing as well. It's just to have as many local filmmakers as I can. And actually that's pretty new that I can even just have a 5 or 10 minute interview at the front of the episode before we get into the bigger discussion of and just has kind of a low pressure way to hopefully support the artistic community here in the film community. I had David C. Cruz on as well for an interview before his screening of Diego Hoy recently, which was a Cinema Society screening. I really appreciate having the connections with the different organizations around the state as well, and meeting people through that hopefully again I can encourage filmmakers to have a bigger audience or just generally support the community in what ways I can. So you can go in any podcast app, just search Arthouse Garage in there, and we've been doing this for a long time, so there's a lot of movies on the list. You can see if there's an episode about your favorite movie, hopefully it's an inviting space. I'm also always open to feedback. You can email me, andrew@arthousegarage.com, or at any social medias if you have a comment about something I said or something I can do better. I would always love to have that kind of information. But please listen. I would love it.